We all have a role in building great company cultures that inspire our people to be proud of their work and proud of their company. Companies who want to attract and retain the best talent are committed to creating cultures where employees are appreciated and inspired to give their best. Work Proud will improve your employee engagement levels and overall productivity by aligning the aspirations of your people with the goals and objectives of your company. Please enjoy this brief introduction of the Work Proud platform and service. The Work Proud platform is accessed via a link on your intranet or employee portal, building a seamless bridge from your HRIS system. Deskless and remote employees can download the Work Proud app for anytime access. Each time you log in, you'll be presented with a timeline that displays Work Proud shout-outs, recognition posts, anniversary notifications, new hires, and stories about individuals and teams you're following. Tying recognition activities to your values inspires employees to work towards company goals and objectives. To create a Work Proud post, search for the person or team and describe the reason you're recognizing them. As an option, you can add a badge to amplify the recognition and reinforce company priorities. Highlighting and sharing the positive contributions of individuals and teams builds social networks within your company and helps create a culture where people are inspired to give their best. The Follows feature builds employee networks that can be based on location, geography, team, or business unit. This gives you the ability to control who and what you see on your timeline and events calendar. The events calendar displays upcoming birthdays and service anniversaries, and with a simple click, you can leave a congratulatory message. The Work Proud platform provides a comprehensive set of administrative tools, including dashboards and downloadable reports that help you and your management team get the most from your program. Far more than just a technology platform, Work Proud is a comprehensive approach to building a culture where people are proud of their work and proud of their company. We look forward to collaborating with you and your team on building a culture of appreciation everyone will be proud of.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for taking a look at that. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Michael Levy.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for the very professional, as always, introduction. You always do a fantastic job in pulling us together and leading us forward and interpreting some of my desires to communicate and articulate the value propositions of Work Proud, and you do it flawlessly. So not only is that a sincere and genuine comment, but it's also core to the foundation of what we're talking about at Work Proud, and that is we have a service-orientated economy in the United States. And senior executives at Deloitte spent some time explaining that, but we all know that. We're all in the service business, and the service business is based on people and human beings. And what moves people forward is, of course, training, education, reasonable compensation plan, holiday pay, benefits. And there's another magical ingredient, and that magical ingredient is let's appreciate people for the contributions that they make. Let's make people as individuals feel important and valued, because in any service organization, it's about people. So if you ultimately care about the business that you're in, you better care about the people that are doing the work. So Work Proud is an approach. It's not just technology, though there is a technology component to it. It's an approach to helping our clients and customers understand that building a sense of pride at the individual and enterprise level is what drives businesses forward, and probably particularly so in this time and age whereby we're all being strained in ways we've not experienced before. And it's not compensation that's going to fix how we feel about the work that we do each day. It's actually a sensation that says, I'm still valued and appreciated, and it doesn't matter if I'm sitting at home, people still notice me, and the work that I do is meaningful. So if you're interested in learning more about our experience. We've been doing this for some 18 years. We'll talk a little bit about it at the end. Of course, we'd be happy to help. More importantly is, as part of our approach in reaching out to the marketplace and saying, you know, make people proud, is to say, well, it's not just about technology, and it's not about installing a mobile app or a website that brings that to life. It's actually an approach that considers the human touch, and particularly the human touch from peer-to-peer and manager to employee and executive to employee and executive to executive. So we've had the opportunity to meet some pretty clever people in our 18 years in business, one of which was Dr. Alise Cortez, who happens to also be a Dallas native, despite my very southern accent. I'm actually in Dallas, Texas. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alise Cortez. Some brief background for those that do not know Alise. She's an amazing, insightful business leader with significant professional experience. She's a great speaker that will come out and do events for you, with you, customized. She's a chief purpose officer, management consultant, inspirational speaker, an author, a radio host. She's got a great radio program, social scientist, and having developed her expertise in human capital and organizational excellence, she's focused now on taking that knowledge, skill, expertise, and helping companies apply some of that learning in their day-to-day. So without further ado, what a pleasure to introduce Dr. Cortez. I hope you get as much out of her as Jim and I have in preparing for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that introduction. It is so great to be here. I so appreciate you to talk about things that I love, like meaning and inspiration and purpose. So thank you for having me. I want to start, if we can. Let me say that in the introduction that Michael gave of me, I want to make sure that I present at the very beginning of this conversation that so much of what I get to draw from is what I learn from my guest each week. So every week I'm having a nourishing conversation with somebody on my radio show. I've been doing it for 5.5 years, and usually in preparation for that conversation, I usually read their whole entire book. And then we talk about the concepts that I think are pertinent to what I care about around meaning, passion, and purpose. So what you're going to hear today is some of the things that I've learned along the way, plus in my practice. All right, so what I wanted to start off with is, what are we going to talk about today is, first and foremost, I do want to distinguish for you that meaning is the chief motivating force. And you're going to learn why that is in just a second here. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to distinguish the word fulfillment from engagement. So most of you on the call are probably human resource practitioners or department leaders. It's important that you understand that there is a difference, and I'll help you get to that. And I'm going to give you various ways that you can literally unleash meaning inside your own workplace as well. And along the way, if you pay attention, what's going to happen is you yourself are going to advance yourself another notch as an inspirational leader. So I want you to grow out of this process too, get something out of it for your company and for yourself. So that's what we're going to cover here. And to get us started, what I want to do is I want to talk about the importance of leaders. And so here we have is one of my most favorite people to talk about, my most favorite leaders to talk about. His name is Roland Hartle. And let me tell you the story of why I think he's so awesome. And it really is given to you to illustrate how much leaders really do matter. So this gentleman, I'm from a small town in outside of Portland, Oregon, small eastern town, population 4,800 when I was there. And when I was in high school, my only driving thought was, I just have to get out of here, right? I just find a way to escape. And I did a co-op opportunity in this hydro pump company, and it turns out Roland was the owner of that company from Portland. And I had him on the phone one day, and he was impressed with my interaction. And he said, young lady, if you ever find yourself in Portland, you have a job. And I went, oh my gosh, hot dog, that's my ticket. I'm out of here. And so sure enough, when I graduated high school, I came and I knocked on his door and I said, you said I could have a job. He said, I did. And so I did a little bit of coursework in business and accounting after I got out of high school, didn't go to college directly, and went to work for him for the first 18 months. And I loved it. This man was a commercial real estate developer. Here's the picture of him sitting in downtown Portland, Oregon. And about 18 months in, literally one day on the way out the door to go to lunch, he swings the door open wide, and over his shoulder as he's walking out, he says, you have to get out of here. You have to go see the world, get an education, do something with yourself. But before you go, hire your replacement. And the door shut. So I sat there the whole time he was gone, wondering what question was I pondering? Did he just fire me? I think that's what I need to find out next. So a little after an hour later, he comes back through that same door and starts to merrily go back to his office. And I stop him and say, just a second, hold on. Did you just fire me? And he said, absolutely, it'd be a crime to keep you here. So here's what's really important to understand, ladies and gentlemen. Before he uttered the words that he said to me, I didn't know I could go to college. So a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a PhD later, I think I can check the education box. I didn't know that I could visit other countries, let alone live in them or speak their languages. So I've lived in Spain, I've lived in Brazil, I speak Portuguese and Spanish very well, a little bit of French and Italian with enough wine, I can do it. I've been all over Western Europe, South America, a little bit of Asia, and this has been such a fulfilling experience for me, and he opened that door for me. And now that bit about doing something with myself, I'm still working on that, right? That's an ever ongoing thing. But this man saw something in me that I could never see for myself, and that is the value of a leader. You have the chance to profoundly impact a person's life. In fact, if you look at this work by Zach Mercurio, who's been on my radio show, amazing human being, I like how he positions that really as a leader, whether you're a human capital practitioner, whether you have people in your department that are reporting up to you, you are effectively stewarding 40% of a person's life. Think about that. So you're responsible for that period of their time. And if their overall life is to be fulfilling, their work must be fulfilling. So no pressure, but let's make it right. So let's start then by looking under the hood more deeply on meaning, because we hear this word all the time, but what is it? And really what meaning is, it's our ultimate energy source. And that's why it's so precious, so important. That's why you hear people talking about meaning and purpose all the time. The difference is they oftentimes really don't know what the heck they're talking about. They just know it's important. And in this conversation, I'm going to teach you what's under that and why it's important, how to distinguish it and unleash it into your workforce for yourself and for your people. So again, this perspective comes from my logotherapy work, and logotherapy is essentially a way to inculcate meaning across your life, to be able to presence it and find it. And when we recognize that our search for meaning is actually our primary motivation as a human being, we start to really understand its significance. And this is where it gets really fun and interesting, especially as people out to develop. Michael talked about people growing and developing. If you recognize that there is a certain tension between what any one person is at any one time and who he or she is trying to become, that delta, that difference is actually a motivating force. And you want that because it's indispensable to well-being. The opportunity is to figure out what's the meaning behind who they are today and who they want to become. That's the opportunity and what we're talking about. But that difference is really the reach and what keeps people reaching, growing, and doing their best. And so we want to activate that. And so here I want to get to, what do we actually mean by the word meaning? It's kind of a squishy term, but really what we're getting to is that which holds significance or matters to us. And it's different for everybody, right? Somebody could say, what's really meaningful to you in this opportunity or this interaction? And they'll give wildly different responses. So it's that which that resonates with your core essence, and you recognize it because it produces an emotional connection for you. So meaning has this power to it that is incredibly energizing. And then when you start to think about, well, what do I do to actually get in touch with that? What you'll see is, just a sec, my screen is also not advancing. There we go. Okay, so what you'll start to notice then, if you think about meaning, is that you'll also notice it writ large when it's not present. And how you notice that is it shows up as what's called an existential vacuum in our space. And so that's the exact opposite of a peak experience. And so how do you notice that? How would you recognize that there's a lack of meaning inside your organization? Is you start to see two things pretty big. One is boredom, which is what I think this woman on the screen shows so beautifully. And if you think about what's boredom, it's an incapacity to take an interest. Wow, how did you miss this amazing day? Really? So in her case, it's an incapacity to take this interest in whatever it is she's looking at. Another way to be able to recognize an existential vacuum or the absence of meaning is apathy. Apathy is everywhere. It's the incapacity to take initiative, to do something, to get started in something. And so those are two ways, and you'll see them. You see them all over on your employee engagement reports, right? When you see people that are not willing to take initiative, don't want to speak up, that's all apathy in action. So the opportunity again is to unleash that and see how you can get away from that and distance yourself from it. And now it gets even more interesting because as an organization, we are bound by other people that are working with us. And so there's this really awesome concept called limbic resonance that I just now learned from Danny Gutnick, who's going to be on my radio show next week. So as I mentioned, I read their books cover to cover. That is why I get to be able to be in a space where I'm constantly sharing new thinking, because I'm always reading and prep for the show. So his book is called Meaning at Work and Its Hidden Language. And what he talks about is there's this palpable ability when you walk into an organization, and I've seen it so many times in my clients, when you walk into a company and you can actually feel the buzz among those people, it's because they're sharing limbic resonance among one another in connection with each other. And so that's that capacity for deep sharing through an emotional state. And it goes back to our fundamental beings as social beings that are dependent on one another, but you can actually sense it and create it together. And it shows up as Team United. We're in this together, and I'm proud of being in this together, to what Michael was saying before. So now we take it to another sphere, another level here, if you will. And if you don't know the work of Aaron Hurst, who has also been on my radio show, you need to look into it. He's really helped us understand that today we're living in the purpose economy. And so he makes a fantastic point about that happening really about 2008, when we got away from our moors of being able to rely on our paychecks and organizations to take care of us, and instead turned inwardly against all the financial fallout and really started looking for that which mattered to us individually, which of course is anchored in meaning and purpose. So that's where it came from. And his organization is Imperative, which you can see in that logo there below. So he and his team have been stewarding a purpose conference. I went to the first one a couple of years ago. I went to the one last year. And if all things align and we get to travel in October, I'll be there again in New York City. But what's interesting about what they're up to in this conference, they call it Purpose 2030. And the reason they do is because what they stand for as a group and as a movement that we're all united in is helping to move the dial from a dismal 15% of the global workforce being engaged to 66. So more than half, the majority, 2/3. That's what they're out to accomplish. Now, in so doing, to make that happen, what they've been able to do, they and the group that are part of this movement have distinguished those words of engagement and fulfillment. So if you think about, we've been talking about employee engagement for decades, and I worked in that space for quite some time as well. And engagement traditionally is the idea of engaging a participant or involving them in the overall organization. So the focus is on the organization and being able to engage that person, that asset, in the work that they're doing. Contrast that with the newer term, which is fulfillment, it's actually individually centered. And the idea is that we're activating their meaning sources to inspire their emotional connection to their work in service of the organization. So you see the difference. Now think about that from just a vantage point of how far we've come just in this idea of work-life balance. So terms evolve. Remember the years when we used to say work-life balance? Wow, who says that anymore? That's way passé, right? We know that we can't achieve work-life balance. And so then it moved into work-life integration. That's better, that's more tenable. That went on for several years. Today's term, which I think is actually quite tenable and something to shoot for, is work-life harmony. So just like work-life balance has evolved, engagement goes from engagement to fulfillment. So that's your new charter, if you will. And I hope that you'll join that movement with me, because it changes everything about how you handle people and work with them. In fact, that's where you come in here. So this human capacity to find meaning is done through conscience. And the way that we do that, the way that we activate that, is through education, whether that's learning and development inside your organizations, the actual work and the way that it gets done, which I'll give you some examples for later, leadership and the way they articulate what they're up to and what the people's contributions are. But all of that helps equip people with their means to find their own individual meaning and elucidate that. And it's in the elucidation process, which is really becoming aware of it, is where the magic happens. And that's what we're up to today. So I want you all to walk out of here with not only something for your own individual meaning system, getting more present to what it is that's meaningful for you in your life and your work, but also really walking out with actionable ways that you can increase the unleashing of that inside your organizations. So now let's get further back under the hood here. I told you I would distinguish meaning for you. So there's really three principal sources of meaning. Again, this is through the logotherapy lens. There is the creative source, which is really what it is that we as human beings give of ourselves to the world. What do we deposit into the world that is uniquely ours? That's creative. The second source of meaning is experiential. And so that includes any encounters or experiences that we have while we're going about this thing called life, and every day and in the moment too, for that matter. And the third way is what's called attitudinal, and that is the unique way that we make sense of and choose to respond and position ourselves in reaction to whatever the world serves us, whether it's, especially if it's difficult or challenging. So those are the three ways that we discover meaning. In my application as a management consultant that focuses on meaning and purpose, I have a specific way that I talk about those terms to help you get even more present to them. So those creations of ourselves, what we give of ourselves to the world, is actually our passion. So think about that. We are giving something profound of ourselves. That is passion. Experiential, really what we're getting to is inspiration. And I'll distinguish each one of these for you as well. And then the attitudinal becomes mindset. And I'll break that down too, so you can see where it comes from and how you can actually impact it. So I love this picture that comes with this. So passion is that thing, right? You always can recognize when somebody's passionate about something, right? And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you know when you're turned on by something, and others do as well. And so the way that you get access to that is you start thinking about, well, what do you really love? What gets you excited? What do you give yourself over to? Or what do you pour yourself into? By the way, when I'm out meeting new people, I don't ask people, what do you do? I ask them, what's your name? I get that. Brenda, what do you pour yourself into? And invariably what I get is I get their passion. And I know something then about their identity and who they really are. And that's more meaningful to me than if I say, what do you do? They might mention that later. But the other thing that happens is when you ask them these kinds of questions, or even ask yourself these kind of questions, you really start to learn what they're proud of. And what they're proud of is also an indication of what they've given of themselves to the world. Okay, here's where my work comes in. When I'm out speaking to audiences on these kinds of topics and I ask the crowd, what are you most passionate about? Invariably, there's a little bit of silence as people think about it. And then the number one response is, I don't know. So obviously that's what I stand to be out to help on, because when you can get access to what you're passionate about and you start doing more of that activity, you have more energy, and that's why it's important to access. So for me, just to get you thinking about this for yourself, I want to know what your passion, inspiration, and mindset is as we go through this. So for me, one of my most favorite passions is what I like to call random acts of kindness. And if you look at this picture, it just so says it all, right? And so how that shows up for me, how I express that is every day, whether anybody needs it or not, I do. When I'm out and about, I go looking for someone that I can affirm, somebody that I can just reach out to. And the reason I do that is because I value empowerment and encouragement. And so this is a way for me to express myself into the world, give of myself to the world. So what that usually looks like is I find some unsuspecting person. I'm looking for someone that I can affirm in some way. So oftentimes I will approach a woman in the grocery store, at the airport, or wherever, and I will just simply say, "You were beautiful." And you know what happens every time is they are generally blown away, blown back a little bit. They get a little taller, and they say the most beautiful thank you, or I really needed to hear that today. And all of us win. So I walk away bigger because I gave something of myself that's important to me. They walk away with something that's been given to them, which actually becomes inspiration, which I'll talk about second. But it's when we give of ourselves that we get that generation of energy. That's where it comes from. It's in giving of ourselves that we get the energy. So we need the opportunities to be able to have the opportunity to give of ourselves. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where you come in as well for yourself and for your team. So how do you unleash passion inside your organization? There are a million ways, and there's just a few right here to start with. So if you look at this very first bullet point here, lead by looking for what's right or strong in people, which is what Roland really did for me in many ways. And so I am a Gallup certified strengths coach. And so I do think it's important to be able to activate people working from their strengths as much as we possibly can. So learning about what it is that really lights them up. What do they do well? What do they love doing? Get them doing more of that. I'll never forget one time I was out doing a strengths presentation and we were going through the results, and one of the women in the crowd, this was at an insurance company, it's a client of mine, and she said, I don't know what lights me up. I look at spreadsheets all day. And I said, okay, why? And she goes, well, it's my job. Okay, well, there's a myriad of other jobs out there that don't require looking at a spreadsheet, and you don't have to do that. There are other ways to make a living. And she looked at me like I had three eyes. And what happened ultimately is it had never occurred to her that there was another way for her to be able to bring these strengths inside her organization. And so in this case, she actually went and talked to her boss and said, where I really think I probably could add a lot more value and have a lot more fun is in sales. And she did. She made the leap, and she's a rock star. So it's just that awareness, right? You don't have to fire people. You can move them if they're not in the right place. I had the fantastic opportunity of having Marcus Buckingham on my radio show back in May. And Marcus Buckingham worked for the Gallup organization for 25 years. And the man helped really birth the whole strengths movement. I think today 33 million people across the globe have taken their strengths assessment and know their strengths. The man has really helped make a difference. And he and a colleague wrote 9 Lies About Work. And a lot of what he's really talking about is the same thing. Let's look for what's right and great in people and help them experience more of that. Help them cultivate more of their own greatness at work. Wouldn't that be amazing? That's what Roland did for me, even though in his way he had to fire me to do it. I'm not saying to go fire your people. I didn't say that. On record, I didn't say that. You just maybe move them or activate them. And then when they do come through, celebrate and articulate their contributions, right? There's so many ways that people ache to be appreciated. And Michael said it in his introduction. And I know it from the years of work that I spent in employee engagement work, where we were surveying and understanding the drivers of employee engagement. And the number one variable most often cited in any organization that people wanted desperately was to feel valued and appreciated. And again, that's why I align with what WorkProud is doing, because they have a way to be able to do that. But being able to do that also as a leader through your words and your actions is huge. I like to call these brag sessions. And so when I do my programs around coaching, I encourage people to learn how to brag about what it is that they've done to make a contribution. And why that's important is that they are articulating their own contribution, really what it is that they've done to make a difference. And in so doing, they're empowered and fueled by that, but also presencing their contribution. And you can do that by having, like in a one-on-one with the people that report to you, asking them to spend the first 3 minutes in a brag session. It works great. They're like, oh, I didn't know you did that. That's so great. Perfect. Now you've told them how you did it. And you can also do it where you can start meetings and just say, here, we're going to inculcate this practice of, at every meeting, we're going to start with a brag session. And it could be somebody individually says, I just want to share that I was so able to take care of this customer. It was the most amazing experience. We went through all kinds of stuff to make it happen, but we came through. Or people can brag about each other. They can talk about how Brad just came through for this client, or somebody, Sally over here, just absolutely came with the best idea that turned it all around. And think about the energy that is released in that. So what we're talking about here in motivation is absolutely energy. That's what it is. And so the more that you can elevate that and activate that, the better off that you are. Okay, inspiration. So again, inspiration is what it is that we get from the world in our encounters and our interactions. And so what's inspiration? Let's break that down as well for you. The word comes from the Latin word inspurere, which literally means to breathe into or influence or animate. So if you think about it, inspiration is actually breathing life into us. How important is that? And that's one of the reasons that I continue to host my radio show, is because each time that I broadcast my sessions, what I'm really doing in some ways is I'm helping people to be able to get that source of inspiration and animation that they need to keep moving. So that's one of the reasons that I keep doing the show. So think about it from this vantage point. In me doing the show, I am giving my passion to the world. It then gets received as inspiration by those who actually receive it. How awesome is that? That's the dynamic that we're trying to presence here. And so when you think about inspiration, what I want you to think about, how would you know someone's inspired? What are we talking about when we talk about inspiration? It's that thing that pulls you, not drives you, because driving is a different kind of motivation. That's being driven by needs. Inspiration is being pulled more from the spirit or for the possibility, and it's stronger. So that's why you want to think about what's inspiring to people. And another way to think about it is what deposits goodness into you. And this is really awesome. What moves you? So everybody knows when they're moved, whether it's they feel that emotional tug and it shows up as tears coming down the face or the lump in the throat. That's the thing that indicates you've been inspired. You know it when you've been inspired. And some of the things, of course, that inspire me, that keep me growing. I love travel, and I can't wait until we can do that again. I know we're in a pandemic right now, and we're all working very hard to activate from that, which is awesome. But travel is a way because it pulls me up to the possibility of being connected to a greater whole and makes me see that I am a citizen of the planet. And I love that. That just charges me all day long. As I said before, I love languages. I love, and I do this every chance I get. Just this last weekend, I was at White Rock Lake running, and I ran into a Brazilian, so I spoke Portuguese with him. He was shocked. I love it when I can show up looking like this, a white woman, and they're like, "Why are you speaking Portuguese?" I'm like, "Oh, I love it," right? It just emboldens me. And on the other side of the lake, I ran into a woman who was speaking Spanish to her client, to her kids, and so I joined that conversation, ended up having a fantastic conversation with her and connecting with her. But my languages give me access to the world and a depth and a richness that I really want. I love that. You can see how much it moves me and deposits goodness into my soul. And you can also be inspired by other things. I think Nelson Mandela, for me, is a fantastic inspiration. What he's done with his life and his, talk about turning something difficult or impossible in his life into something amazing that has impacted millions. That inspires me. So how do you do it in your organization? A couple of things to think about, and I already told you this about Roland, is if you're constantly looking for ways to be able to lead people to their greatness, which is what Roland did for me. He started that process for me. And let me say something to you about this man, Roland, that I didn't say before. That's important that you get. That impact is a lifelong contribution for them. It's not a moment in time. It's a lifelong thing. I worked for Roland 36 years ago. And you know that we're still in touch. The man cannot get away from me. No, he can't. I have stayed in touch with him in all the years that he's been in Portland, whether it was by holiday letters at the end of the year. I invited him to my wedding when I got married at 35. I recognized him at the wedding as important in my life. When I got divorced 16 years later, who was there to call me every single weekend to make sure I could get through? Roland. And then today, ever since, he and I meet on a annual basis when I come through Portland to see family. And the chair he was sitting on at the beginning of the show is his own invention. So he's 83 years old now. He's still out there inventing, and now it's my job to support him. And I love it, absolutely love it. So when you think about what the power of inspiration, helping people lead them to their greatness, the impact is infinite. Another thing that you can do to bring inspiration inside your organization is to bring in clients or whoever receives the benefit of your product or service. Bring them inside your organization and let them tell the story of how they've been bettered because of your product or service. That is one of the most amazing ways to ignite meaning through inspiration inside your organizations. And then again, to say thanks in a way that is really, it lands in a way where it's meaningful to the other person because you've touched their heart. And so learning to be able to give appreciation through something like, I put this star medal up for you. I'm guessing many of you have seen it before, but it's really good that you inculcate it as a practice. And so it's the thing of not just saying, hey, thanks, Michael, that was a great job. I really appreciate what you did. That can almost be more harmful than actually giving a heartfelt, star-oriented thanks. And so what that looks like is you delineate the situation that the person was in, what they did, the task they did to contribute, the actions they took of what they actually did, and the outcome or the result, and you say that all and why it was important. So I'm going to do this on the fly here really quick for you, Jim. Sorry, you can run, but you can't hide from me either. But the situation that we were in is we had planned for this webinar for quite some time. I submitted my deck to Jim, the marketing extraordinaire person. He then looked at that deck and went, this could probably be improved here by just a tad, given what I know of how to market and position images. And he then set to the task and the action of adding a lot of these different images that you see that make the message so much more powerful, so much more accessible. And the result is you're getting a far better presentation from me, thanks to Jim, because he came on and he was willing to be, I didn't even ask him to do this. He just did it himself. So Jim, I thank you so much for making my product and my difference and my message so much stronger because you stepped in just by being you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing your presentation.
I'm glad you were there to hear that. So the last area that we can talk about for meaning construal is through mindset. And I don't think any one of us has ever not been able to hear the word mindset, whether we heard about it from fixed or growth. But mindset is incredibly powerful. And the important thing about mindset is you do choose it. And therefore it's empowering because you can choose it. And so you can take pride in the attitude that you choose, especially when you're faced with challenges. Like there's people right now in this pandemic that are facing excruciating challenges. And the mindset that they take, the attitude that they take against that stance is the thing that actually can give them meaning and inspire people around them at the same time. So when you think about these kinds of things I love these construals here. In fact, my daughter, who's 17, just got into her, I hope, first and only car wreck. And she said, I made a really big mistake. And I said, yep, you really did. And so the opportunity here is, how do you learn from that? So mistakes help us learn. If we avoid mistakes, I want her to avoid that mistake, of course. But what do we learn from that? Now she knows. What she's learned is, ooh, distance behind another car is really actually important. Mom has been saying that for years now when she drives. And so is speed. Okay, I've learned something now. So this being able to articulate and contrast, things like it's good enough versus is this my best work? I love the thing of, I can't change versus I can always grow. I love that. And I wouldn't be doing what I do now if I didn't think you could always grow. I've seen remarkable evidence and examples of people who have really come so far in their growth trajectory that you wouldn't recognize them as who they were before. And I find that so inspiring. So here's a quick little thing that many of you have also already heard, but it really illustrates the power of mindset. So bear with me as I go through it one more time. So this is an example of how the story is that a gentleman comes on this large construction site, and he sees all this activity going on. There's all kinds of people doing this work. Their heads are down. They're working hard. So he wants to just ask, what are you guys doing? What are you guys building? So he comes up to the first person, and the guy looks up from his task. When he says, what are you doing? The gentleman says, I'm laying bricks. Isn't it obvious? I'm laying bricks. So that vantage point, that mindset indicates he's got a job, he's getting paid to do a task. Another person who's really sitting right next to this person, when he's asked the question, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a wall. So he's taken it a little bit higher level here, and now you might be thinking he's thinking of it in terms of a career. And then the last person here, of course, looks up from his sweated brow, gazes at the horizon, and in his response, he says, oh, I'm building a cathedral. So the whole point there, right, they're all doing the same work, but the point of it is when you believe you matter, you change people's lives and motivation and results follow. That's the point. And it's all in the matter of how are you showing up as a leader or as an HR practitioner to be able to cascade that message out. And certainly as a leader, when you help people understand that they matter, that's an incredible unleashing result in performance, engagement, retention. And so because you can choose your mindset, it's even more empowering. So if you don't already know this guy, Ben Zander, who I pictured here in a YouTube here, caught him, basically in action. I love what he says on some of his programs. He tells a story of how he's he or somebody that he's talking about is in a cab in New York City. He hails a cab, the cab screeches to a halt, and he jumps in the back of the cab and he goes, go, 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 hurry up, get there. And the cab driver goes, where are we going? And he goes, doesn't matter, I'm needed everywhere. What if, right? What if we each went into our day like that? Can you imagine the difference that you would make? And what if you helped your people feel like that? What if you were able to give them the idea that, wow, we can't make it here without you. You make the difference. So I can't resist. If you do Google him, I should say YouTube him, look for him on YouTube. The guy has incredible videos. But what I wanted to recap what we did today is we talked about meaning as your ultimate motivation source, and it's the emotional connection that makes it so. I talked about the three principal sources of meaning, which is, of course, passion, inspiration, and mindset. And I gave you lots of ways that you can start to inculcate this meaning to help people elucidate it and gain access to it. And I hope that in so doing, you got a few ways that you can become more of an inspirational leader and be proud of who you are. And that brings us really here, where I wanted to share that, again, one of the reasons that I'm a fan of Work Proud is because I believe in what they're doing to be able to provide a systematic way of being able to recognize people and their contributions in a socially constructive way. So We talked about the limbic resonance of how people can be connected. Their system that they've created allows people to more meaningfully connect and give that feedback and that acknowledgement of contribution that is incredibly meaningful to people. And that means it's not all on the leader's shoulders as well.
Everybody knows exactly that Alise speaks the truth from a standpoint of it's not the only motivator, it's not the only driver of engagement, of course not, but it's a significant dimension that is very poorly handled by the majority of the clients and customers out there. What the reason is, who knows? It's easier to tear people down than build them up. Maybe that's a human nature. Maybe it's business leaders because they have a tendency to sort of battle and be strong, or whatever the word is. But the illustrations of, I think, the summation of the experience that that Alise had in terms of remembering the influence this gentleman had and that story. She didn't say, I got a pay raise in 2007. It was such a great pay raise, you wouldn't believe it. Right?
No.
There's nothing wrong with pay raises. They're good. They're part of the thing, right? They're part of the experience, and they're a requirement, a responsibility. But she remembers this person, right? The interactions that Alise had with Jim, that going above and beyond you did, right? And then, of course, that translates into the bricklayer metaphor, and how beautifully that surmises. We all want people to feel that they're part of the cathedral. How else are you supposed to deliver our exceptional customer service unless you yourself feel you are experiencing that customer service from your organization? Jack Welch used to say this thing: look after your employees and they'll look after your customers. Right? So what's the work proud dimension to that? Is the world at the time and the period we live in have people touching this device 200 times a day. Well, they don't look at the device. It's not the box that they're looking at. It's the window into the world that's behind the box. And so we're saying, make sure part of that window has your company's value propositions and has your relationship expressions coming through that. And it's not enough to just actually put the box in place, right, and the window, but actually you have to have people like Alise or others to inspire leaders, or you could be the inspirational leader, to inspire the leaders within the organization and the change management, so people more frequently ask themselves a really important question. Did I appreciate anyone this week? One, did anybody do anything for me, right, within the company? If the answer is no, well, find new people, right? Because you got the wrong people. If the answer is, oh, actually, yes, Jim made Alise and I look fantastic and marketed and brought you people together, I need to recognize Jim. And of course, at the end of the year, Jim should get a bonus. Oh, you'll quote me on that, right? But more importantly, there needs to be the story that Jim goes, and they talked about me and it was great and they got recognition, and that's the work proud and the technology and the platform, because technology is a part of the world and we pick up this thing every day. So better do it really well, right? And so for 18 years, we've been doing it really well. So, we have an opportunity to ask Alise some questions, and she's great and inspirational. So I'll get out of the way. I'm happy to answer any too, but we'll get out of the way and give you guys an opportunity to see if there was any perspectives or inputs or insights or things that you would ask, of Alise.
And as we're formulating the responses, I think Jim is looking at the portal here. I would also ask you just to also share, what did you get from this conversation? What resonated with you? What was like, oh, that's kind of different, or I like that. I wouldn't mind hearing that as well.
Right. So on that particular topic, on the point of passion, I want to share what Trevor shared with us. He said, my passion is continual learning, whether that be for myself or others. I love to help myself or others realize that you can always be learning more every day. So we thank Trevor for learning with us today.
Really quick, if I can jump in on that. Trevor, thank you so much for weighing into the conversation. We asked you to do that, and you did that beautifully. Thank you. 2, I share the need and the desire to learn and grow. That's one of my top 5 strengths in Gallup. And be careful, because one of the ways that's shown up for me is hosting this radio show. So if you want to host a radio show, talk to me. Okay.
So if you have any other questions, we're gonna keep getting through these. So drop any additional questions in the chat box. We'll answer them now and get to any that we do not get to post the webinar. So this one came from Mary, and this might speak kind of to the technology side of things as well as the other aspects. But she says our organization is pretty conservative and might not be open to the social aspect of a program like this. How do you approach this for organizations like ours? So that I think could be
a Michael question, yeah.
Okay, so that's a fairly common theme, because more often than not, leadership is coming from a different mindset, a different period of time, naturally have a different set of challenges than perhaps the emotional state of individuals. So fair enough, we understand their perspectives, and the first thing that as HR professionals making recommendations to that audience, to that personality type, needs to make is, we understand that's a great perspective. Now, here's some realities. 1, this format of communication is not a question mark, like should we do it? This is the form and method of communications and interactions that your employee population use. So you can walk around and pretend that computers don't exist and that the internet's a weird thing, and who would ever get rid of fax machines, let alone beta? You can be that kind of business leader, but you can also be the kind of support resource that says the change has already happened, right? We now need to adapt our approaches and principles to meet the market where it is, the market being the employee population in this case. And this is how they communicate and interact with each other. So we have to meet them at their level if we wish to be an employer of choice, and if we wish to have an impression upon that population that says we know and understand you. And having established that position, then it becomes about, well, how do you utilize it? And some of the, I guess, the most heartening stories, but interesting stories we get is, once the programs have deployed and are live and leadership get their hand on it, and they then go and say, oh, I guess so I can actually tell a story, maybe like, they won't say like the president of the country does, or presidents around the world, and they can do posts and everybody sees it and feels a personal connection with it. Once they get and understand that, then they're actually, they want to do that because they want people to be proud of working for them. What CEO does not want their employees to be proud for working for that company, and by extension, the CEO? Every single one of them do. And once you then get the CEO's attention and they do a post and they see such a large population in their, their employee population engage with it, it makes them feel better. It becomes self-fulfilling. And so we see that commonly happening, and that is that leadership then begin to take ownership of it and go, great, we like this. There's still anxieties about, right? But the anxieties never materialize to anything more than, wow, this is a great way to talk and communicate. So.
And let me add on to that if I can, Michael. This is so great because it speaks to what I invited people to do, was to step into being more of an inspirational leader themselves. And so whoever asked that question, you have an opportunity to be able to take what you've learned today and make it into your own voice, to be able to share it back into your organization, because that's your contribution. That's your way of adding more value and stepping more into who you are as a person of influence who's making a difference to your organization. And I really want to encourage you to do that, because that's part of your value and what you get by growing yourself in the world. And it's awesome. It's really awesome. That was a great question.
So this is sort of directly feedback to how actionable your presentation was, Alise. Richard says, great perspectives and information, and then says, using the STAR method to speak with employees is a great idea. We'll adopt this immediately. So
awesome. Thanks, Richard. Cool.
STAR method.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question about that?
Oh, no. It was more just a general comment, but I was just asking anything additional that you want to add to sort of the STAR method and how organizations can implement it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me extend the idea even further here. So one of the things that is really becoming more and more spoken about and evangelized is that each of you as individuals influencing other people, and certainly as leaders, I encourage you to become pretty darn good storytellers. So what's a storyteller? Is somebody who can convey something that happened in a way that people remember and that it moves them. So if you can add in the idea that when you're giving this STAR method way of feedback back to somebody, if you can tell a story about this, let me tell the story about how when Richard came and rescued us, here's what we were facing. And he or she tells the story about Richard coming through, and it becomes a story, not just a way of feedback. So he's obviously sharing with a bigger crowd. Now you've even got bigger reach and more of a tentacle ripple effect here. And Richard has now been recognized by a larger group. Now, I do recognize some people don't want to be seen on a platform, and that's totally cool. But that's another way to extend that and take it into more of a story form that's really incredibly effective.
Yes. This kind of relates to the question about conservative organizations, but Tanya asks, how do you get executive leadership to buy into something like this?
I'll start, and then Michael. Okay, so what I would say is, first I would look at your performance as an organization. What is your employee engagement or fulfillment score? Where are people? How much are people leaving the organization? Do you see what's your retention rate, and how does that compare with that of an industry average or standard? How are people showing up? If you were to even take a looking around, as I said before about the apathy and the boredom, what's the pulse in your organization? You can actually feel that. But those measures of performance are really great to start with, and you start recognizing, and again, you as the human resource practitioner being able to tell the story and paint the picture through measures and metrics to get the attention of somebody who's being paid to pay attention to those is a great way to start. And then recognizing that the importance of value and appreciation can go a long way to move that dial would be a great way to open that conversation.
Great. Anything to add, Michael?
Always based on your audience. In a summary, it's that old, I won't call it a cliche, but culture eats strategy for lunch. Mm-hmm. And you can ask yourself that question first, and then say, how will the executive leader that I'm about to talk to respond to that statement? And if they're of the type that says, I agree, then your angle and positioning is to say, we don't necessarily have a cultural problem, but we can improve the culture. In order to improve the culture, it's about the actions and behaviors. We talk a good talk here and everybody nods. We have good, posters around the elevators about how great a place we are, and we spend a lot of money with our consultants to get some really good values in bullet points that we go, these are our values. But what do we actually do to bring it to life? So that's the angle of the conversation with the executive. We have to do more than have a PowerPoint presentation that we all sat around and patted ourselves on the back and said, that's what we stand for. Isn't that great? And walk out the door into our Mercedes-Benz, to our private homes in gated communities, and realize, yeah, but that's not how everybody else sees us. And so the question and the dialogue is, well, how would you like to be perceived, executive leader, executive leadership? What kind of culture do we want to have here? And the question of orientating to being proud of the work that people do and proud of the company is a 100% guaranteed certain strategy. Even if you don't work with us, it's asking yourselves the questions internally in the leadership. Do you think people are proud of the individual jobs they do? I'm sure everyone will say, yes, I think so. They'll probably scratch their. How do we know? Right? How do we know if they're proud? What do we think they say? What do our engagement surveys say? Do you have a question around that? And then are they proud to work for us? And that's the spirit and principles by which the company then stands, i.e. the bricklayer. What kind of bricklayers do we want? So, those are angles and questions and elements. And certainly we've seen, many innovative HR professionals raise this flag, and let us tell you, some of them have received some extensive visibility all the way up to the top of the organization. Why? Because this topic is so public and visible, and it's a positive one, and it's one that people want to be associated with, and it's cheap as all get out to do. And so it ticks the box at every professional that wants to go forward and go, I want to have an impact. All right? I'm not a processor. I want to have an impact where I work. Okay, I have an impact. You can. Anyway, thanks, Alise. You were wonderful and inspiring. It's great to hear it all together, in the finished product. And we're lucky to have you. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of most of the folks on the call that it's like, if we could take some of that energy and apply it on a day-to-day basis, wouldn't that be wonderful? So I appreciate you, and of course, thanks everybody for attending and being part of it. It's no fun if there's nobody attending and listening, so it's great to have a good audience, and we wish you and your families all the best. Thanks very much.